program. Welcome everyone to the Friends of Folk Art Lecture Series. My name is Kathy Campbell and I am the current chair of the program committee for our group. We have one upcoming event, which is the last program for the 2020 to 21 program schedule. And that lecture is entitled Relicarios, the Forgotten Jewels of Latin America, with Martha Egan and Amy Grollo. It will be held in May and we'll announce the date very soon. Martha has just written a book on relicarios and owns Pachamama store in Corrales. And Amy is the curator of Latin American art at the Museum of International Folk Art. So we hope you'll join us for that talk. I think it will be really informative. We are now working on some interesting programs, events, and trips now that things are opening up for the 2021 to 22 season. So please watch for more information on in the FOFA bulletin and emails. And if you're interested in becoming a member of the Friends of Folk Art, please go to the museum's website at museumfoundation.org to join. Today, we are very excited to hear Sydney Scherr's lecture entitled Mohans' Chariot, A Journey into Divine Creativity. And now I'll turn it over to Ellen Premack, who is the chair of the Friends of Folk Art Committee, to introduce Sydney.
Well, good afternoon, and I want to give a big hello to a special friend in New York, Siona Benjamin, who I see has joined us. Well, it's my greatest pleasure to introduce Sydney Scherr, who I do know from Santa Fe Community College and all of her great teachings. Sydney's going to be telling us and showing us her breathtaking experience of building and creating a jewel of a masterpiece in the mid-2000s and was completed in 2017. Mohans' Chariot is named after a silversmith in Kuala Lumpur named Mohan. And Sydney is the only American and the only woman who has been given the honor to experience the creation of a traditional chariot for a local temple in Kuala Lumpur. With a team of silversmiths, they put in years of work to make a world-class Indian chariot that took years of work, emotion, and construct. And when I say emotion, I mean this is has been an emotional project to be involved in for Sydney and those of us who have helped her prepare in the last day. You're about to witness an incredible documentary, so full of visual imagery that you'll actually feel the space, witness the sounds and the aromas of a cultural tradition held in honor of the birthday of Ganesh. It was a community effort from the funding of the materials and chariot makers to the community enthusiasm of the cultural parade. In the end, this gift has been given to the Hindu temple in Kuala Lumpur, one of many, and has been a once-in-a-lifetime experience that Sydney is going to take you through. I just want to mention that Sydney lives in Santa Fe. She's the head of the silversmithing department at the Santa Fe Community College, and she's going to be showing her work at the La Fonda Hotel as part of a Native American presence within the La Fonda, but for visitors to Santa Fe, but she will be showing her enamel and silver work. So Sydney, welcome, and we're looking forward to it.
Thank you, Ellen, and thank you all for coming and your curiosity to see Mohans' Chariot. This is a little cumbersome to get started, but there we go. Okay. Mohans' Chariot. a journey into divine creativity. I've got to get rid, okay, there we go. To enter Mohan Subramaniam's studios and showroom defines the connection of masterful design, extraordinary craftsmanship, and the reverence of deeply held beliefs. There is no ambiguity in the meaning or context of Mohan's work. For as a Hindu jeweler, spirituality is a visceral, if not literal, manifestation of the work made and the making of the work. It was an auspicious day. I had been in Malaysia only 2 weeks, and I was trying to develop the first jewelry program for higher education in the country. I met Mohan at a local tools shop. I heard him laugh as I tried to sort out a foot bellows torch, and he graciously stepped forward to introduce himself. This kind gentleman offered to teach me. He said he had a little jewelry shop in the Masjid India section of Kuala Lumpur. Mohan's impact on my life and the lives of those around him cannot be understated. His attentive friendship, his appreciation of a well-timed quip. Nothing is working on my computer, sorry. And his recognition that his life works well because he believes in the talents of those around him. He is one of the most honorable men I have ever known. And because all of this, Mohan's world is one of the great gifts in my life. His vision runs deep and is full of heartache. You would not see this in passing, but Mohan is framed within the solitude of great loss. And this great loss has in turn framed his artistic vision, his generosity of spirit, his deep devotion, and his desire to attain an absence of the senses. Sri Ganesh Alayam in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, ordered a new chariot. Built in Tamil Nadu, the beautifully painted chariot was shipped to the temple. Rangoon, the temple president, decided that it should be made even more beautiful and more inspirational. To this end, he asked Mohan to consider making his first chariot. Mohan's wife Nalini will let you know this had better be his last chariot. At dinner one evening, Mohan and Nalini told me about the commission. I had no idea chariots were still being made, and only the chariots of the Roman gladiator came to mind. So in my imagination, I saw Kirk Douglas and Spartacus. Mohan and Nalini were animated in describing all that a chariot meant and why a traveling temple was so meaningful to a community. Transfixed, I asked if I could document this process so that the making of a chariot could be seen by those also unfamiliar with this world. This gave me extraordinary entree to witness creativity and attitudes that transcend work and border on divine. While deconstructing the wooden chariot, Mohan correctly estimated that 1 ton of silver would be used to clad the wooden structure. Adding this much weight posed many challenges to the structural integrity of the chariot. Steel I-beams were added to the undercarriage to shore up the weight load. The weight load was also too great for the steel-clad wooden wheels, so the chariot was hiked up on 8 forklift tires, and the chariot's original wheels became decorative accessories. Initially, the idea had been that 2 oxen and 100 men would pull the chariot. Out of necessity, this changed to using a decorated tractor that tows jumbo jets away from the gateway at airports. Many of the chariot's paintings were reproduced as silver panels, although most were completely redesigned by Mohan and the chariot makers. During the deconstruction, Mohan asked me what I thought of the sunflowers that encircled the crown, or China Kondugai. I told him I thought they were ugly, and after a good laugh, he agreed. He asked that I redesign them for the chariot. It was thrilling to have a small part in this monumental process. Later, he and I spoke about my making the sunflowers, because as an enamelist and as a jeweler, I could bring color to the chariot. I had just been enlisted as a chariot maker. Imagine, an American woman as a chariot maker. Exacting deconstruction. The chariot was stored at the temple until the rooftop studio was completed. Portions of the chariot were brought to the small silversmithing studio piecemeal. The work was ongoing unless there was urgent temple work to make. To my eyes, there never seemed to be a plan as to how the work was being produced, except for as a consideration to scale and space. Later, I learned from the chariot makers there had always been a plan. And of course, there had to have been a plan. Ganapati. Ganapati is the chariot's lead maker. This is his 14th chariot, and he has designed and been involved in all areas of production and sequencing. Ganapati learned at his father's side, but this is his first chariot where he has the leading role. Although he is open to all suggestions and ideas, he is determined to make this the most beautiful and reverential of chariots. Ganapati's original drawing of the chariot follows traditional guidelines for the construction of a temple on wheels, having 22 separate sections and tiers. Designs are found in historic writings and drawings that are passed from generation to generation of chariot makers. And Ganapati gifted me one of these books. Senthil Kumar. Senthil Kumar is Ganapati's uncle and is the next lead team member other than Mohan. They are the heart and pulse of the chariot makers. Prior to moving to the rooftop studio to accommodate the size of the chariot, the team worked in a small, chaotic, and crowded studio over the showroom at Sri Ganesh Jewelry. Tools lay everywhere to fabricate the thousands of chased and repoussé silver panels. During the 3 years spent photographing the men and working with them, I fell in love with their hands at work, their keen and deeply held devotion, their humor, and their playfulness. Naren. Naren is an apprentice chariot maker preparing pitch for the next day's work. Naren's father is a sculptor in Kumbakonam, India, so he is unable to help train his son in a tradition often passed along to the male children. Yet Naren is lucky as he is learning from the very best. The chariot makers. One of the great joys of working as a chariot maker is being close to the beautiful drawings done by the men. This joy included a surprise drawing of me holding Brahma's repoussé head. The forms, the style, the elegance of a graceful line all speak to the language that is art and that is inherent in the creative journey, whether secular or religious. Brahma, the creator being recreated. Mohan's chariot is not ready for Ganesh's upcoming birthday, and it is not because friends come to visit. It has been 6 months of hard work in and around urgent temple work delays and interruptions. Clearly, Mohan will not make the September Ganesh birthday celebration deadline. In fact, it will take another 2 years to complete. When asked, Mohan acknowledges the only thing he didn't accurately account for was the time it would take to create the chariot. The plan, complete one of the 2 horses for Ganesh's birthday. The studio was so crowded, Muthu needed to work in the hallway leading to the studio. His work included hammering forms against his thigh to soldering on top of a rock in the hallway leading to the men's room. The studio is a lively shamble of tools, homemade rebar raising stakes, silver, toes and hands hard at work. Always barefoot, the men feel a closer relationship to a divine state of being when they are barefoot. I watch the men holding the silver with their hands, feet, and toes. We work tirelessly and seamlessly. Mohan trusts that each of us embody the spirit behind the beauty and are afforded a great deal of autonomy for design and decisions. Literally counting down the days to deadline, each studio and the bedroom upstairs are drafted into a workspace where the jewelers are burnishing all of the sections that make up the horse as they are completed. Since the deadline is coming fast, the men ask why I do not make enameled eyes for the horse. They ask me to ask boss, and I do ask Mohan. He thinks this is a good idea, and so the first of my contributions to the chariot begins. If you look closely, you will see chased and repoussé nails in the horse's shoes. The tongue moves on the bit, and there is no doubt that this horse is all male. There is no element of detail that does not have symbolic significance. The jewelers and the office staff were drafted into polishing the horse. This was in a bedroom. Space was a premium and sometimes a luxury. Polishing is done by hand with steel burnishers and soapy water. Prabha tried on the horse's eyes as soon as I had completed them. Deciding to make enameled eyes meant removing the beautifully chased and repoussé eyes already on the horse, but no one ever seemed to mind these revisions. The first horse is completed on Ganesh's birthday. It is a moment for everyone at the temple to witness the remarkable beauty and imagine what the entirety of this chariot will be. It was no longer possible to work in the cramped studio. We had grown far too large and had too many individual pieces to manage, not to mention 7,000 silver nails. The work moved out of a storage closet and took over a bedroom used by 3 men who moved their bedding to the newly completed rooftop studio, as the chariot was never to be left alone. Moving to the rooftop took place deep in the night, little traffic and fewer witnesses. Even with this precaution and the men in place to protect the chariot, there was a break-in around 5 a.m. on the night the chariot was lifted to the rooftop. After this, the vigilance was ever greater, and there were no more postings to social media until the nearly completed chariot had been lifted off the rooftop. I like this representations of beliefs in this image: a Catholic church, the Kale Tower with its vestige of Islam, and the Hindu chariot about to be raised. This encapsulated the framework I'd come to know about Mohan, that there is room for all, and it is why a Jewish white woman from the United States could be a part of this extraordinary team of artists. The Hindu spaceship of Kuala Lumpur. The chariot barely fits wall to wall and needed to be moved outside and under a tarp to allow the chariot makers room to work. The huge rooftop studio is very full very quickly. The floor space would need to be rearranged so that the craftsmen could have space to work under cover from Kuala Lumpur's harsh sun and abundant rains. Parts of the chariot were stacked against the walls, scattered all over the floor, as are the tools. Sometimes there were so many tools on the floor, walking was a neat bit of choreography, so as not to step on anything or anyone. Due to space, I am not able to set up to work on the enameled flowers on the rooftop studio, so I set up in the goldsmithing studio. This is Ganapadi's video of making the sunflower ceiling, or what I came to think of as the Hindu version of a quilting bee. The sunflowers. My next contribution to the chariot included over 72 bezel set enamels that made up the 8 sunflowers. This is the only Hindu chariot in the world that has enamels. The cloisonné enamel sunflowers ring the crown and are encased in heavily back-braced silver bezel frames. The frames are attached to a silver cord that hides LED lights. Later, Mohan and I discussed how to get more color throughout the chariot. Many ideas were explored, and we decided on champlavé enamel elephant head embellishments for the columns, culminating in 102 separate enamels for the chariot. Describing joy. Every day at 4 p.m., Mohan provided brew coffee for everyone at Sri Ganesh. Brew coffee is an Indian coffee that seconds as a hot milkshake. We'd all relax from the midst of a 12-hour day and enjoy the calm quiet and the delicious drink. One day, while sitting on my chair that had a seat made from a discarded plastic laundry basket stitched onto the chair frame, I watched the jewelers talking and using their phones, and then I noticed the scorched walls from overzealous soldering. I thought, I am ridiculously happy. I can't believe this is my life. Mohans Chariot, USA. After working in Mohan Studios for several months, I left Malaysia for home. I had not seen my mother in more than 2 years, and my work visa was about to expire. I moved the sunflower production into her studio. For 5 months, I put in 900 hours on the flowers. My portion is very small given the totality of the chariot. Yet the flowers and the horse's eyes, and later working with Vasi on the elephant embellishments and Brahma's eyes, all helped to make this chariot unique in the world, something for which I feel great pride. And I know I'm very fortunate to have been included in the team. It took 3 torches and 4 hands to solder the silver flower bezels to the lighting core. I was lucky to have a mother who was a jeweler to lend an extra hand. The sunflowers are small by chariot standards, weighing 5 pounds each, but pretty good size for a jeweler. By the time I completed the last flower, I could not feel my hands. I only felt them buzzing. I think about the work the men do, how it must impact their bodies, and understand why all the chariot makers, yet none of the jewelers, sleep on hardwood planks. It is to protect their bodies from hours of yoga style sitting on the floor 12 hours a day. Time to go home to Malaysia and the chariot makers. I spent the summer into fall designing the elephant embellishments and helping burnish chariot elements. I returned to Malaysia carrying 40 pounds of sunflowers on board. Only in Japan did security need to see all 8 flowers, even though they had been very carefully packed to get to Malaysia intact. The chariot makers loved the screw top and scrutinized my craftsmanship. The flowers passed their exacting inspection. Me, I was just happy to be with the guys again. I see how far along the work has progressed while away, yet we are still a year out from completion, and another birthday for Ganesh is about to be celebrated. The temple's small old chariot will be used for the very last time. Mohan dresses the statue of Ganesh, the chariot's Ganesh, in gold, rubies, sapphires, emeralds, and diamonds for his birthday. This is the honor of the jewelers to create. Saravanan Muthu. Muthu is Ganapati's brother. He arrived at Mohans with no training as a metalsmith. Ganapati believed he could do this work, and Mohan trusted Ganapati. He trained in the silversmithing shop at the side of his brother and uncle, Senthil Kumar. Mohan considers Muthu's work the most inspired he has seen. Delicate and refined, small and large scale chasing and repoussé, he works seamlessly in silver and gold, with extraordinary attention to minute details that define him as one of Mohan's finest artists, and he gets the chair. Mohan and Muthu are at the temple to fit Ganesha's gold birthday gifts. The gold work goes through a final fitting before the gem seats and gems are added. Ganesha's birthday embellishments pass through many hands and many processes. Always a team creation where ego of the artist respects the better abilities in each. The jewelers are working hard to meet the deadline for Ganesha's birthday.
everywhere.
Jewelers Shanmugam and Jayananth holding the work they have completed for Ganesh. Mohan with Ganesha's birthday suit. Beautiful rituals of spirituality at Sri Ganesh Alayam. During Ganesha's birthday celebration, I watched the lighted candles move as the temple's young priest blessed Ganesh and his new birthday ornaments. This would be the temple's last celebration using the much loved old chariot. I marveled at the differences in these two moving temples, from old and quaint to the promise of new and profoundly radiant. It is thought that to make a chariot is a blessing, and I now know that this is true. The community celebrates Ganesha's birthday and says goodbye to a beloved chariot. These moving shrines bring the heart of the temple to the community. Elders and the very young, or those who cannot get to the temple, are able to enjoy and participate in the celebration as the temple comes to the whole community. Children are lifted onto the chariot so that they may experience a sense of spiritual appreciation and belonging with Hindu traditions. This revered old chariot has been donated to another temple. Okay, I've got to screen share again. And sorry about that.
Doing great, Sydney. Don't worry.
I'm just trying to move this thing. There. Okay. After a splendid night celebrating Ganesh's birthday, it was back to the rooftop studio. Mohan came to the rooftop often. We would talk and have brew coffee. We thought through each piece, idea, and concern. His problem solving is remarkable, but he is always attentive to the thoughts of his men as he knows they are closer to the fine detailing of this chariot than he. Mohan had hoped to see enamels encircling the wheels, but as we discussed this possibility, it was decided that the enamels would be too fragile for the thousands of hands that touched the chariot in passing. Polishing the chariot requires enormous effort and patience. We did this by hand burnishing with soapy water and steel and agate tools. Each piece of the chariot was polished in this fashion, and I lent a hand for many weeks as I waited for the elephant embellishments to be cast in preparation for enamel. My workspace, a stool anywhere on the floor. How do you polish an entire chariot? Balagaru and Manigandan polished by hand.
Thank you. Right. Thank you, Bala.
In Malaysia, the men know that to want a tool is to make a tool, or fashion a method of working that is bizarre and wonderful. The best tools are old. They have seasoning. The best tools come from their fathers. I know some of my cherished tools came from my mother and grandfather, and perhaps this is part of the thread that connects us. It is impossible to comprehend the time it takes unless you actually see the time that this takes. An average day on the rooftop studio. Senthil Kumar the Younger. Senthil Kumar the Younger assists in the large preparation work for the metalsmiths, making huge pieces of sheet metal from rolled lengths of silver that are given tabs and welded together, hammered smooth and readied for pitch. Another of his efforts is creating the large silver forms that enable the senior metalsmiths to begin their delicate chasing and repoussé work. He is also a key man in the complex fitting of the individual panels. This is a massive puzzle, and all the elements need to fit. And like his nephew Kanan, he is hilarious. Kanan supports all the work in the metalsmithing studios. Kanan works magic behind the scenes, preparation of materials and handling of pitch, holding, soldering, making zinc molds, whatever needs to be done to support the efforts of the senior metalsmiths. Senthil Kumar designs and repousses 24 deities to encircle the interior of the chariot near the sunflower ceiling. 12 feet from the ground, the central deity is always Ganesh. I was fascinated with the research Senthil Kumar did for the detailing of each panel. 3 deities edged by swans, Brahma's transport, 5 images per panel. There is a comment by Mies van der Rohe, former leader of the Bauhaus. God is in the details. I think of this each time I think about these panels. Too high up for anyone to really see, yet the attention to detail and the private look I see in all of the men's faces as they work. I see the certain knowledge that what they are doing is far more meaningful than any one of us. The depth of their chasing and repoussé. Completed panels bordering Ganesh. The deities are from major temples around the world. Mohans' world will always attend to urgent temple work from nearly all Hindu temples. At this moment, the chariot work is interrupted for a mercury gold gilded altar. I did not know that mercury gold gilding is still being done. There are men trained in this ancient and fiercely dangerous technique by their fathers. Mercury gilders traveled the world to do what is often clandestine gilding. On a clean copper base, the mercury is drizzled from a cotton sack. It is applied over the metal and spread with brushes. Then the gold is applied piece by piece and burnished into the liquid mercury by hand. From making the gold leaf by hammering small squares of 24 karat sandwiched between sheets of incredibly tough material made from a camel's stomach, to applying it to the liquid mercury by hand, this nomadic gilder moves fluidly from ancient technology to recording his achievements on his camera phone. I spent the day photographing the preparation for the gilding, then had to head home as I was dressing for an evening at the symphony. Mohan calls and tells me the schedule has changed and the guys are going ahead with the gilding that night. I said, "No, Mohan, I'm in a chiffon dress and ready to head to dinner in the symphony." He laughed and said, "Okay, no worries." Yet I couldn't stand not to be there, so I left and went straight to Mohan's. Missed dinner, but hoping to get to the symphony. I planned to simply photograph, but the guys drafted me into trying the process. It is terrifying and exhilarating all at once. On my knees, pushing gold into mercury by hand. Once applied, it is invisible, so you're not exactly sure where it is placed. Later, it is washed in tamarind. Later still, it is scrubbed with charcoal. Mohan had come up to the rooftop then and said the altar was having a spa treatment. I missed the heating that brings up the gold, but I saw it a year or so later for an inner altarpiece being made for the temple. It is stunning to consider that this technology continues to be done, and it is done all over the world. Ganapati had worked on a gold gilded chariot in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, using 26 kilos of gold and untold amounts of mercury. Manigandan mercury gold gilds Ganesh's transport for the inner altar. I cannot help but think about Manigandan. 22 years old, a new father. He travels the world to Mercury Gold Guild, and I imagine his health is compromised, if not fragile. But this is what he knows, and he learned this from his father and grandfather. Tradition. How do you change the course of tradition when a young man knows one thing well and needs to do this to support his family?
Mercury. Mercury, you can't get it. It's very hard to get. I don't think you can get it.
This process,
Yeah.
yes, no mercury.
No, it's illegal.
Illegal.
Yeah. I'll stick to the equally unfriendly enamels.
Stadium ornaments, no, yes. Stadium ornament.
ರೇಷನ್ ಕಾರ್ಡ್ ವೋಟರ್ ಐಡಿಯೋ ಇದಾಗ
மெசேஜ் வந்துருச்சேன் அவனுக்கு.
They're about to give Musagan another spa treatment with tamarind and hope it doesn't get anything in the chariot. Over this Mercury baby. Finally. It's a far longer process than I anticipated. I thought it would hit the heat and just go bright gold, but no. And the gold is very matte, so they'll have to burnish the entire piece.
Mani Gandan burnishes the newly Mercury Gold gilded altar base for Musaka, Ganesh's transport. Mohan had asked me to join him and record the process when he fitted this altar to Ganesh's base in the main altar. As Mohan fitted the gold base to Ganesh, I was as respectful and careful as I could be not to step into this revered space, even though my camera was suspended into the air that is strictly for men, more so for priests. Although I had been given extraordinary access to life in and around the temple and had even been invited into the sacred space by the senior priest, I recognize it as a space reserved for priests and men. When Mohan asked that I film the process, I still wanted to do this as mindfully as possible. So I had my toes crammed up to the entryway, but did not encroach. A young priest, new to the temple, came to scold me for being where I should not be. Mohan stepped out and told the priest I was from CNN. Without missing a beat, I shook the priest's hand and introduced myself. Hi, I'm Christiane Anandpur. Blessing the chariot. Before thousands of panels are mounted to the wooden foundation, there is a rooftop consecration of the chariot. The priests come and gives blessings. There is a ritual where all the chariot makers hammer into place the first panel of the crown's foundation. Rangoon and many of the temple elders join in the dedication. With this blessing, the whole of the chariot is ready to be silver clad. The first panel is joined to the chariot's wooden foundation. Extraordinary detail in 7,000 handmade silver nails. The first of the completed areas, the crown. A bag of angels, and Mohan and the men are discussing the lighting sconces, where they will be fixed to the corners to set the exact angle so the lights are trained correctly. The night of the inaugural celebration, I watched as Mohan continued to make subtle adjustments to the light. 2 years after being lifted to the rooftop, the silver-clad chariot is packed and ready to be earthbound again. Nothing is left to chance. There are blessings to chant and limes to roll over, offering protection for the chariot's journey back to earth. The men are holding on to the last and waving goodbye as the chariot is lifted off the rooftop to make its descent to the flatbed truck. We all held our collective breath. The men are a bit anxious about the chariot's journey to the truck. Mohan has purchased hundreds of pillows to cushion the stack of chariot parts on the flatbed truck and to cushion this precious cargo's ride to the temple. Basi and I are now working to get the elephant embellishments completed. Basi and I are only able to work together in the evenings now, as I taught all day. I learned from him and he from me. Negotiating decisions was a new process for me since I'd worked alone on the sunflowers and horses' eyes. Teamwork was an unexpectedly pleasant learning curve and something I admired from everyone else as I watched the chariot take shape. The chariot is at the temple, but the details are still being made. The wheel embellishments, lighting sconces, small deities, musaka, the elephant embellishments, and completing magnificent Brahma. Mohan has many of the chariot support craftsmen and his jewelers at the temple, helping to attach all the chariot's many major sections together and to repolish the chariot prior to Ganesh's birthday. The studio has never been this chaotic and wrecked. We are all exhausted and thrilled, close to completion, yet there is so much to do, we are overwhelmed. So of course I ask why the horses have enameled eyes and Brahma does not. Mohan said it was a good question. Only 3 weeks out from the completion date, and the men saw Brahma's 8 eyes, and Vasa and I are working late into the night to give the creator beautiful big brown eyes. We are having the inaugural roll out of the chariot on Ganesh's birthday, and the evening before there will be prayers and celebration at the temple to honor Mohan and the chariot makers. Magnificent Brahma. I love the look on the men's faces. Each is in a separate space that looks a lot like joy. There is such devotion and pleasure in creating what will touch the hearts and lives and resonate deeply in the sensibilities and beliefs of a community. The very top of the chariot. This symbolizes the kalasam that is found at the top of Hindu temples. These containers hold the seeds for each community so that should there be a natural disaster, the area will be able to replant and thrive. The temple has built permanent scaffolding for access to the chariot. Before the scaffolding was built, the chariot makers and jewelers were teetering on an unsafe ladder, often stacked on top of a chair, to assemble and polish the chariot. The scaffolding seconds as a gated safe for the chariot. Mohan is very stressed. The chariot is oxidizing before our eyes, and we are trying to grasp why this is happening. I recalled purchasing jewelry boxes long ago where the glue was outgassing a vapor that tarnished my jewelry. Unbelievably, the glue used to strengthen the silver was doing the same. Mohan had all the metal epoxy filled on the back before nailing it to the wooden structure. The epoxy was to prevent deformation due to the thousands of hands touching the moving temple. There is no remedy. The chariot will need extraordinary care and polishing prior to festivals. The men are very excited when I suggested using handheld electric car polishers.
It's silver.
It happens in the shop, it only happens here.
I'm going to play this one again because it missed most of it.
I அது பைப்பு பெருசு இல்ல வீடா ஒன்று என்னப்பா பாரு பாரு just discolors so fast.
Yes, it's silver. It surprises me.
It's a shock, you know. It only happens here.
I began to cry when I saw the completed chariot in the hangar. I've watched this and participated in the chariot's creation for years. Nothing prepared me for how extraordinary it is, how reverential it is. I do not have the language to describe the emotions, the sense of accomplishment and connection to something so much more significant than the finished work. There is a sense of awe when you behold something divine. I did not expect to cry, yet the shape of this was more than I could comprehend and nearly more than I could bear. The night before Ganesh's birthday, the temple honors the chariot makers with a special ceremony. The chariot is seen by the community for the first time. I watched as every emotion filtered through the eyes of those who saw the chariot, each bringing their prayers and hopes, their wishes and private concerns to this traveling temple. Its beauty makes all of our prayers resonate with the depth of emotion that is palpable. Remarkable moments. I cannot speak about working as a chariot maker without recognizing how surreal this experience was. To have been included as an American woman in this breathtaking opportunity is only because of the visionary outlook of Mohans Subramaniam. I am very honored to have been a team member, and I have come to love each and every member of the team. An auspicious day for Ganesh and his breathtaking birthday celebration. The night before, the chariot had been blessed, as were the chariot makers, but tonight is very special. The priest and temple president Rangoon begin the intricate process of dressing Ganesh for his inaugural ride on the chariot made for him. Before Ganesh is moved to the chariot, he is paraded through the temple. Outside the temple, the birthday party is in full swing. And my cat saying hi. Dancers celebrate in the street before the procession. Brahma holding the reins to the horses and ready to begin the procession. Ganesh is moved to the chariot and ready to inspire the community. 2,000 coconuts are broken in front of the chariot before it moved. Coconuts are considered God's fruit in that they have 3 eyes, representing Shiva, the father of Ganesh. Breaking coconuts symbolizes the shattering of the ego in the presence of the divine, and in this state, one is able to taste the sweetness of their beliefs.
Dancers? It is what?
Ganesh's Chariot, 2014. But we're not done yet. Musaka, Ganesh's transport, was not complete in 2014, and finishing him in the platform that he and Ganesh swing on are planned for Ganesh's next birthday, a deadline that is missed due to all of the other work taking place in Mohans studios. By 2016, Musaka and the swing are completed, and Ganesh also receives a new necklace for his birthday. Although my work on the chariot is complete, I continue to document the ongoing creations that make up the chariot. I find Musaka's wooden tail decided as the ideal prop placed behind the unsuspecting chariot makers. Mohan visits and discusses with the men the issues surrounding the swing in Musaka. That Ganesh is on an actual swing presents many challenges. How to keep the swing moving smoothly given the torn up roadways of Kuala Lumpur, and how far it will arc and float before bashing into one of the columns or the priests who ride on the chariot. Ganesh is on his new swing and riding Musaka. He is adorned with a new birthday necklace, a 477 carat emerald surrounded by diamonds. Ganesh has moved onto the chariot after the ceremonial parade through the temple. Oops, hold on. Sorry. Oh well, that video doesn't want to play. Ganesh's Chariot 2016. The chariot makers of Sri Ganesh. Thank you. I can't hear anything.
If anybody has any questions, please feel free to either enter them in the chat or unmute yourself and ask Sydney.
Sydney, could you tell us just a little bit about the god Ganesh, what he symbolizes and etc.?
Ganesh is the son of Shiva and the brother of Murugan. And Ganesh symbolizes wisdom and releasing of obstacles. So he's the elephant-headed boy.
Yes.
And the reason he was elephant-headed was because, if I remember this correctly, Shiva thought his wife had been unfaithful. So when he found his son, he kind of zapped him.
But he's a joyful god.
That's sort of what I remember. What?
Okay.
He's what?
He's a joyful God.
Oh my God, yes. And the reason his transport is a mouse, because he was unusual looking as a elephant-headed boy. So the only that would play with him was a mouse.
I love it.
Sydney,
How much? What was the cost of the chariot? And how was it financed?
Okay. Ron Goon, the president, really wanted this to be his gift. There's a lot of reverberation. Anyway, Mohan encouraged him to open it up for people to be able to donate to it so that they had a part in it, and that was fine. Mohan charged cost for the silver, so there was no markup on the silver. And Mohan donated our labor. He paid us, but our labor was donated to the temple as his gift to the temple.
Wow.
So
Extraordinary.
yeah, it was more than you know.
I bet.
It's
and
just,
there's another question for you to retell how you got involved in the project process.
okay. Well, like, as I said, when I first moved to Kuala Lumpur, I was trying to find a tool store for jewelry and I couldn't find one. And so I was getting my hair cut and I passed a jewelry tool store. It was like, oh, forgot the haircut, ran into the tool store and started, because I had to facilitate and fit up, build an entire jewelry program. So tool store, and I can't find a torch. I'm finding lots of tools, but I don't see a torch. So I asked Chua, the shopkeeper, where's the torch? And he points right at my foot, and he points at a foot bellows with a long hose and then a brass can with chimneys coming out of it, and then more long hoses and a handpiece that was gigantic. And I said, no, really, where are your torches? And he said, right there. And I said, are you kidding? You don't have anything more modern than the 1700s? And by that time, Chua was like getting tired of my problem with the torch. And he said, you just go to the airport and get jet fuel. And I was like, what? And I heard this soft laughter behind me, and I turned around, and it's Mohan, who I didn't know at all. And he stepped up and he introduced himself. And he said, I have this little shop on Labuan, and these are quite nice torches. And if you come down, I'll show you how to use that. And so I did. And little shop didn't begin to describe his place. Oh my God. He was pulling stuff out that he had made to show me that was so breathtaking. And he took me through all the different floors and studios. And
Wow.
he was so gracious with his time. I realized I only lived a 5-minute walk from his shop. So every Saturday, that was the first thing I did. I'd go down and see what else amazing he had made. So over time, we got to be friends. And then I commissioned him to make me a piece of jewelry, which I'm very proud to have. And then he lost a son in that period of time. And it tore me up for him, because he and Nalini are so devoted to family. And this was his second son that he had lost. And so they just disappeared. I didn't see them for a long time. And I made a piece for them symbolizing their two children together in a different space, a different realm. And gave it to Mohan when they were back. And he was very touched by that. And so we started doing things socially. And then when he told me about the chariot, he and Nalini, and I asked to document it. I never expected to become a chariot maker, but it was one of the great gifts in my life.
Wow.
There's a question from Ellen about how many types of gems and what kind of gems are part of it.
Diamonds, emeralds, sapphires, rubies, and I think that's about it. But those, and Ganesh is in 22 karat gold with all those gems. And Brahma has those gems on his head.
Amazing. Well, lots of other accolades in the chat as well about what an amazing lecture this was, and great media and great job, Sid. So thank you so much.
No more questions?
Nope, just terrific, great, most amazing, extraordinary, fabulous, best one ever. Yeah, just how much does it weigh?
The whole chariot finished is 3 tons, 6,000 pounds.
What
But
type?
1
what-
ton of silver. I'm sorry?
Sorry, what type of creature is under Ganesh?
That's a mouse. That's his transport.
Big
Musa. Because he played with Musaka when he was a little boy.
Okay.
You know how much silver they did use? Was that sterling? Was it fine?
Fine silver.
Was
Yeah.
fine silver. Do we have any kind of idea how many ounces, pounds, whatever?
It was a ton.
Was a ton.
A ton.
And some of those tools, like the chasing tools, were those like railroad ties?
They were
Railroad nails?
all kinds of things. Railroad ties, yeah. And some of them had been so used so many years that the steel had split and curled around the staff of the tool. So it was, I mean, the tools themselves were just so beautiful. And I know that a lot of the guys used rebar raising stakes that they made. They just welded rebar together and polished the top of the rebar. And there were just so many wonderful moments of watching them, how they would prop things and do things. And the pitch, for those of you who don't know what pitch is, that brown material the silver panels was on. In my longer version of the lecture, I have this video, but Kanan and Senthil Kumar, the younger, would prepare the pitch at night, and pitch is pine sap mixed with red clay. And they would have this pot that you would cook like giant creatures in, you know, like big, like stew pot, huge. And they would, it was in a sand pit, and they would have the silver buried in the sand. And with, they would cut up tin cans, huge, like petrol cans, and have a framework around the silver, and it's in the sand. And they would melt this resin pitch and pour it in there into the framework. So the tin cans made like a mold for it. And they would let that harden overnight. And pitch then becomes a malleable, deforming surface onto which to do all this hammering. And anyway, watching the guys doing this, they would just like use newspapers to pick up these pots. They were so heavy, and so, I mean, pitch, if it hits your skin while it's hot, doesn't stop. It just keeps burning through your skin. I mean, it's really dangerous. And they were barefoot in the sand pit to do this. And it would just scare me to death. But I'd watch them do it at night, and they'd get it prepared for the morning.
We've got a few more questions here. How long were you there, Sydney, all in all?
Well, I was at the college for 7 years, and I took a year and a half. I took a year and a half off to work on the Chariot and with the guys. And then there was a part of that time that I was back at the college, working full time at the college and just running down to the rooftop at night to work. So I was in Kuala Lumpur for 8.5 years.
And then where's the Chariot now, and how do they keep it polished?
Those electric car buffs. It's the Sri Ganesh Alayam, which is the name of the temple, the Hindu temple in Kuala Lumpur. Now there's many temples in Kuala Lumpur because Malaysia has three major cultural groups. It's Malay, which is Islamic, and Chinese Mandarin, and predominantly Tamil Hindu, not Northern India.
And then can you say a little more about the men's extraordinary acceptance of you as a woman and an American in this process?
Well, I remember when I was first drafted in, they were sort of used to me taking pictures of them, but I wasn't one of the craftsmen. So as soon as I was elevated to that status of being a chariot maker, and I really can't tell you how unusual that was, because this is really strictly a man's world, and they learned by their fathers and grandfathers. Anyway, so at first they were like, why is she here? And she's white. So, and that took literally less than a week for us to get over that. And I became one of the guys, and we would sponsor dinners, and and that meant usually just eating way too much and drinking way too much. Those guys drank more, so much. And then Mohans started joining our dinners, and the guys were really stressed about it, and they hid all the alcohol bottles under the table. And I was like, Mohan drinks? And they're like, no, boss, no. And I said, I drink with Mohan. And they're like, no. So he comes into the restaurant and gets up to the table and says, where's the alcohol? And all these bottles start showing up on top of the table. And Mohan later told me that he had never really gotten that intimate with his men. It was really business. And that my being there transformed that somehow. I mean, I was just the segue for that friendship to happen, because I had become very close to the guys, and I was very close to Mohan and Nalini.
And then was the work done on the rooftop for security purposes?
Well, it was the silversmithing studio above the showroom at Sri Ganesh was about, I would say, 11 by 14 feet so, on the second floor. So you can't get a chariot up there. So that's why we were just doing piecemeal. And so Mohan had accommodations for his craftsmen across the street in this walk-up building. And so it was 6 stories up, but it was a walk-up. And he created walls and sort of windows and you know, and we hoisted the chariot up there, and the men slept downstairs from it. And then 3 men always slept with the chariot. It was never left alone.
Welcome to Ellen's parents is one of the comments, joining us from South Dakota. So good job, Ellen's parents, for being able to log in. And then there's another question about, can you tell us more about using mercury as an adhering agent for gold gilding?
Well, aside from the fact that it is terrifying, and you know, and I did it because I was sort of brought into the fold to do it, and so I wasn't expecting to do it. I thought I was going to the symphony. I certainly didn't expect to do it in a chiffon dress, but anyway, it's done. I can't even begin to tell you how bizarre even finding out that this still goes on, and this goes on all around the world. And like I said, it's done clandestinely. And I felt pretty bad for about 2 weeks after I did it. And Mohan sort of just called it chariot fever. But I think it was like more than that. Anyway, so I scolded Mohan. I said, you have guys wearing sarongs around their face to keep the vapors out. You need to get them those big canister respirators. And he did. So, and then the guys started inventing, they all were like geniuses. They started inventing these vacuum cleaner suctions, and doing stuff to try to protect one another from doing, you know, this process. But it's mercury drizzled out of a cotton sack onto the metal and then brushed, and then we just push it in.
Wow.
That's amazing.
Amazing.
Any other questions?
Ginger, I have one that went to our email.
Oh, great.
Because she couldn't make the chat work. It says, please ask Sydney, what's next after such a deeply meaningful project?
Well, you know, it's really hard to come back to earth after an experience like that. But I was fortunate because I was already very invested in an initiative I started with my students in Asia called the Alchemy Design Project. And it's where we would do fundraisers and make tool sets with materials and go to different countries on the human trafficking watch list and teach young survivors of human trafficking how to make jewelry sustainably, where they didn't have to use fossil fuels, they didn't have to use electricity. And we would provide them with copyright-free designs that we did and for the country that they were in, so that they would learn how to make jewelry outside of like tourist destinations. And then they could sell their wares rather than their bodies, because most of these children, when we got to them, were 15, 16 years old, but they had been sex slaves since the time they were 7 and 8. So their stories touched my heart more than anything. And I realized that these young women were the embodiment of hope. And their spirits were so robust. And I've stayed in touch with most of these girls. And one of the girls, Painith, just got married. And and so many of the young women she had been in the Alchemy Project with were in Cambodia, were with her at her wedding. And it just, these girls take me to my knees. And so it's a project I am fiercely devoted to. And I want to recreate this initiative stateside. And it had been my hope once I was at Santa Fe Community College to do this. And then as I was starting to roll out ideas about it, we got hit with the pandemic. So that sort of crunched that, but it's still right there in my heart and in my mind. And it's something I feel so passionate about. So that's how I was able to come back to earth from having worked on the Chariot, because both of those projects just are so incredibly meaningful to me.
Sydney, I hope the Alchemy Project can be incorporated into the folk art market. That would be wonderful. And I hope the folk art market can rise to adopt it.
That would be amazing. That's going to take some logistical challenges. It has a lot of logistical moving parts and challenges because these.
But it's such a worthy project.
But I understand that, but I'm not. It's not that I don't want to. It's just that I'm trying to. Instantly, I jump to the logistics of it because many of these children are slipped through borders and they do not have documentation. Mm. They have no passport. They have no visa. They have no birth certificate. So getting them into another country is incredibly challenging. And maybe I can become a representative for them so that their work comes here if they cannot. Yeah. But that's a great idea and something that we can talk about in the future with the folk art.
The other question supplemental to how to do the gold gilding with mercury was, do they realize and know how toxic it is?
Yeah, of course. And But, you know, when you grow up in such a culture so steeped in tradition, and technologies are passed down through the generations, it's hard to move that needle very, very far. But I think that, you know, respirators are a good beginning, and some kind of gloves, so you're, you know, your feet aren't in the mercury. So.
Wow.
Amazing. Anything else, guys? Well, on behalf of Friends of Folk Art, thank you so much, Sydney, for taking time out of your Sunday to present this amazing presentation. And
it's a real honor to present to the International Folk Art Museum and Friends of the Folk Art Museum. So
we'll send out a recording of the talk and a link to Sydney's jewelry website, as well as the dates and times for when she'll be showing her work at La Fonda. So thank you, guys.
Thank you, Sydney.
Thank you.
Happy Sunday.
Yes. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you, Sydney. It was
Thank you.
fabulous.
I know, it was just wonderful.
Oh.
Yeah.